What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, Nattie Boss, registered dietitian, fitness coach, and lifestyle coach of bodybyboss.com. If you haven't tuned in to last week's video, then make sure you do, because you're in the middle of a series, a three-part series where my friend Jim Schultz and I are going to be talking about 3 fat loss tips. That there are many different tips out there for fat loss, but we decided on 3 that we really think kind of work with both of our different lifestyles. So make sure you pause this, go check that one out, and then you come back here, tune in for this one, because we're going to kind of build on that with today's tips.
Yeah, Jim Schultz, F Cubed is the company, is the brand, fitness, finance, and faith. And yeah, basically my 3 loves in life. And so we are kind of knee deep inside of this little series about fat loss, something that you and I have both experienced and spent a lot of hard hours in our lives trying to figure out. And so yeah, I'm excited to get into this tip number 2.
Unless you're really, maybe into it and reading up about it, you might not understand what this term RPE means, the rate of perceived exertion. So I want Jim to expand on this a little bit, and especially how he uses this in his training as a natural bodybuilder. So I think this will be really interesting. So Jim, why don't you take it away for this RPE concept and give your take on it?
So RPE, this is a term that's I think it maybe started in the running community, but it's really heavily used actually in the powerlifting circles and also in the bodybuilding circles, which is kind of my world. And so RPE, rate of perceived exertion, it's a scale from 1 to 10, and it basically measures how intense your set was. Now, it doesn't matter how many reps you do, it's its own scale. And it basically means this: if it's a 10 out of 10, that means you could not have done another rep. You went to complete failure. You literally could not mechanically do any more. If it's a 9 out of 10, that means you had 1 rep left in the tank. If it's an 8 out of 10, you had 2 reps left in the tank, and so on and so forth. So you could do a set of 3 reps or a set of 15 reps. And they could both be an RPE of 10. When it comes to fat loss, RPE is something that sometimes gets forgotten, because I genuinely feel like, just kind of watching, and I'll be curious to know if you feel the same way, just kind of watching, I think most people in the gym are simply not training hard enough. What do you think?
Absolutely. I feel their frustration, because I understand, I know the missing link, but a lot of the times I just see people either resting too long, or just I can tell that they could probably push more weight or do that extra rep, but they just stop a little bit. They fall short a little bit, whether or not they believe that they can, or whether they don't know if they should push themselves. They don't realize the benefits that it has, and they kind of do that. But I notice that a lot across the board, and I am almost like, is it worth doing it at all if you're not going to push yourself a little bit? Because sometimes I just feel like, when you have a pair of maybe 5-pound dumbbells, what's that really going to do if you're not really pushing yourself? You're not really putting tension or stress on your body. You know what I mean? It's different if maybe that's your limit. But for most people, they just kind of grab a light pair and they just think, oh, let me do a set of curls real quick. But that they're not going to see the results they want to see, because they're not pushing their body to where it needs to be.
That's exactly right, and I totally agree. And, just looking around, it's like most people need to be training harder. Most people need to be challenging themselves more. And so when it comes to something like an RPE, the biggest takeaway here is it's a couple of things. Number one, you have to remember that, we're really talking about fat loss, right? You just have to remember that for fat loss, you're most likely going to have to be in a caloric deficit. And when you're in a caloric deficit, your body doesn't want to hang on to the muscle that it has. It actually wants to dump that muscle because it wants to survive. And that muscle is metabolically expensive to hang on to. So you want to do things to motivate your body to maintain the muscle that it has. And one of the things you can do is make sure that you're going high enough on the RPE scale with your sets. If you can hang around like a 7 or 8 most of the time, where you're just stopping a couple reps short of true failure, then you'll be really in a nice sweet spot.
I like to think of it like the last 3 to 4 reps should be really tough to get to, but not impossible.
I love that. I really love that because that's a very practical way to capture exactly what I'm saying.
Exactly. So it's like you are doing that little extra, maybe that little oomph for those last couple reps, but that's what's really going to give that muscle damage and that metabolic stress, which is going to tear those fibers, which is going to help build that muscle in that anabolic stage afterwards, if you're fueling your body right afterwards.
The great thing about kind of living in that RPE 7, 8, 9 range is you get the perfect balance between all three. Because, for example, if you do a couple sets to a 10 RPE where, you know, you're taking it to failure, you're all out, you're like, man, I'm really pushing it, I'm challenging myself, you're going to do a tremendous amount of muscle damage.
Yes.
But the problem is you're going to have a really difficult time recovering from that set.
Yes.
So it's going to impact your overall volume, and you may end up doing less mechanical tension and metabolic stress as a result of the lower volume. So you're maximizing one variable and sacrificing 2 others. So, you know, that 7, 8 range kind of gives you a nice balance between all three.
And once you have that newfound muscle, that's going to help, again, boost your metabolism and be able to then aid in that fat loss even more. But why don't we talk about real quick the 2 variables for the RPE, which is volume and intensity. Why don't you just brush on those 2 definitions for maybe people who don't necessarily know what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So the intensity is basically the RPE itself. So that's one way to measure intensity, right? So we have the 1 to 10 scale. Another way might be percentage of 1 rep max. And there's actually another metric that you will oftentimes hear too called reps in reserve, which is literally just the inverse of RPE. So like an RPE of 8, you left 2 reps in the tank, that would be an RIR, reps in reserve, of 2. And so it basically means the same thing. It's just people are just, you know, somebody decided to come up with something brand new and just confuse everybody by making inverse of RPE. But I get it. Like, I understand. One of the primary drivers of muscle growth is volume. And volume is nothing more than number of sets times number of reps times the weight that you use. And so as long as you're pushing enough volume through your system, you're probably stimulating muscle growth. However, you need to make sure the RPE is high enough, because there is some evidence to suggest that if your RPE is like under 5 all the time, you're just not challenging yourself enough to stimulate a whole lot of muscle growth.
I love using volume as a tool for muscle growth because you can really play with those 3 variables of volume, the sets, the reps, and the weight. So you can experiment by either pushing your body to stay in that 7 to 8 RPE by adding weight each week if you feel like it's getting too weak for you, or you can just increase, you know, a few reps at a time. Because if you did maybe 15 or 12 reps the week before, pushing it up to 15 reps now is still putting the 3 extra reps where you're pushing yourself. Or you can just do an extra set of everything. So it's cool because you can play around with that. And it's a way to kind of keep it interesting too and have fun with your workouts, because I do think that you got to have fun and, you know, experiment with different ways and also see what works best for your body and stuff like that. I like to manipulate all 3. I think that's always worked best for me.
So I totally agree. I love what you said because, you know, to give your viewers and my viewers and everybody out there watching really practical tips, I mean, that's one thing. You can use all 3 variables. More weight, more reps, or more sets will all equal more volume. So I schedule my training, or I structure it usually in like 5 or 6 week blocks. So I'll have like an intro week, and then I'll have like 3 or 4 accumulation weeks, and then I'll have a deload week, and then I'll start the whole cycle all over again, which I'm sure you kind of do the same thing. Yeah. Well, in the accumulation weeks, one of the tricks that I've picked up is I'll take whatever exercise I'm doing, and I'll start it off at like a 6 or a 7 RPE. So the sets are fairly easy, but still challenging enough to stimulate that muscle growth.
Yes.
Then over time, as the block progresses and I get more comfortable with the movement, you know, you get the neural adaptations of your motor units just, you know, getting really efficient with whatever you're doing, I'll start to ratchet up the RPEs to where a 6 becomes a 7 becomes an 8 becomes a 9, and then in that final week of accumulation, that's when I may start pushing to failure. And that's when you start to really see what you're capable of, and that can set a whole new bar for you for the next block and then the cycle just continues.
I hope this was helpful for you guys for this RPE concept, rate of perceived exertion, because I do know it's more of a on the technical side of things, but I hope that we broke it down enough for you to just kind of think of it in simple man's terms of as long as you're pushing yourself, and think of the rule of thumb between 7 and 8, right? You don't want to be completely to failure all the time, because it's also you're not going to like going to the gym. You're going to be sore the next day, and you might actually inhibit your progress by being off for 2-3 days because you're trying to recover instead of staying on schedule. So it's going to discourage you. So just stick to something that's pretty tough. And again, you can manipulate the reps, you can manipulate the sets and the weight. And for a lot of you beginners out there, if you necessarily don't have so many exercises in your arsenal, maybe you don't know of a lot of different exercises, you can stick to simple exercises using that same method. So a lot of the things I like to do, something simple as an example to take away from this, I like to do squats, right? So of course you can do squats, and you can do squats with a barbell, and you can do the same thing where you're doing the reps, sets, and weight and changing it up. But you can also add intensity by adding resistance bands to your legs while you're doing squats. And then you can do it by elevating your feet with a plate underneath. So you might only know a couple exercises, but by using different tools just to increase that intensity a little bit, that will still help you in that fat burning mode. Do you agree with that, Jim?
I couldn't possibly agree with that more. And I just want to add one thing to what you said, because I thought it was really great. You know, you talked about being so sore for 2 or 3 days that you can't get back to the gym. That's absolutely true. But let's also remember that it's on those sets when you really go to the max that the risk of injury is the highest. And soreness will set you back 2 or 3 days, but a full-blown injury, now you're talking weeks and months. And so that's another reason why that 7 to 8 range is so valuable.
All right, cool. So guys, if you have any questions on this concept of RPE, shoot Jim a message, shoot me a message, comment below. We will definitely answer those questions for you and how we personally use them. Again, if you wanted more of that, I'll put all of his information in the description box so you can contact him with his Instagram and all that jazz. And until then, we will tune out and see you guys next week for our third and final tip.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.